Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a review of the British Pageant, which has been taking place over the past couple of weeks at the Preston Temple up in Chorley. They asked everyone to give feedback for the pageant, and so this is our way of giving that requested feedback. I'll be joined tonight by many of the Brit Vengers and by a ultra special guest who has flown many miles just to be here for you tonight. So and they're not even going to have to do time codes. How about that? That is something else. So hey everyone, we have the Brit Vengers. We have Maven with Peter. We have Julian, who just hangs around, formerly of Sunstone, and we have Jane of 21st Century Saints. So welcome all. I believe everyone here, apart from Maven, watched the pageant. There was a Brit Vengers watch party on Friday night because the pageant for the first time was live streamed. They put it out there in the public domain. They made a recording of it themselves, which is what allows us now to kind of go over it and review it. I warn you in advance, this video may get demonetized or even taken down through copyright. Oh, Maven saw some of it. Okay. This may get taken down, so your donations and support are welcome, because this may not be around for long. But come get involved in what is to be possibly a very exclusive moment for those watching, as we get to watch little bits of the pageant because of the live stream. But before we do, I think it's important to mention that had I tried to turn up to the pageant to watch, there might have been some issues. This is because this picture of yours truly was found at the pageant. Not sure why someone had printed off a picture of my face onto paper and what that was doing kicking around in the offices of the pageant, but this was shared with me that it was there. So I can only assume it was there to have people watch out for me and, you know, maybe even not let me in the pageant. But the real crime of this photo... Okay, yes, so they may call it a bolo in other circles. Yes. But the real crime of this, I would say, I'm just going to turn Maven up so we can hear her, but the real crime definitely is who is missing from this picture, because this picture was taken from my Nemo the Mormon Instagram. The best looking people were chopped out. Wouldn't you agree, panel?
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
And our very own Jane from 21st Century Saints decided that she would make it a bit more official than, you know, just a little bit of paper. She would turn it into a proper wanted poster. So there you are. I'm wanted for fact-checking and charming Mormons across the world, and people are to approach with extreme caution. I think that's right. I think that's fair.
If you zoom in...
That sounds more like a bolo, too. Mm-hmm. Because that is a phrase that would potentially be on a bolo, is approach with extreme caution. So
there we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, Julian.
I was just going to say, if you zoom into the original picture that was found... No, not that one. Sorry, the one that was found.
Yeah.
Are there lots of tiny little holes?
No, it is pristine. No stains, no holes, nothing.
It wasn't used for a dartboard?
No.
Okay.
No. I think it was legitimately only used to warn people of my potential presence. So I've contacted individuals involved in the pageant, and we'll see what comes of it and what they have to say for themselves. Oh, my name did come up in conversation too, apparently, according to Mark Johnson. Okay, Mark Johnson, the man who sees and hears all, please tell us more as and when you can.
Can I just jump in to say, so our another one of our 21st Century Saints, Sarah, is in the chat tonight. Sarah will make it very clear why she finds this deeply disturbing. You know, we have a great sense of humor here, Nemo especially, but this is deeply troubling and is really not okay. So I'll let Sarah pass comment, but to sort of hold up a photograph to a room full of very devout Mormons who are high on pageant fumes, it's This is
High on
very
pageant
worrying
fumes.
to me. I'm not okay with it. However, we do reserve the right to utterly rip the piss about it. So, yes, is it possibly that someone was looking for your autograph?
Facial hair inspiration for the
is?
cast. I think that's what it is. I think they were like, this is what we want your facial hair to look like. Slightly disheveled and not quite full. So Julian's picture will have been distributed for the real men to grow beards. And this is like, so the sort of prepubescent late teens, this is the sort of facial hair we want you to achieve for your role in the pageant. I think that's what that is.
So we don't have the rest of the top 10 of Mormons most wanted here.
No.
It's just you. Yeah.
But I wonder, am I the ace of spades? Yes, Julian.
I'm thinking.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not sure you're aware. You know how if you're your patriarchal blessing says that you're from the tribe of Levi, then you automatically can become a bishop.
Right.
So I was asked to be in the pageant. I didn't audition or anything like that. If you have a beard like this, you automatically are able to join the pageant.
To join the pageant. Just dint of your beard.
I decided not to, but just by, if you've got a beard like this, they'll just say, come on. What part? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of accents in the pageant, and we'll get to those, but I think, Julian, your accent would have added some much-needed variety, because there was a lot of northern accents.
What accent?
I'm going to jump in on Jane's comment before we move on from that, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'm really glad she brought this point up. And again, this is coming from my security background. That's what I did before joining Mormon Stories and Mormonism Live. And I'm also still licensed in Utah to do that. So if this was kind of like an informal bolo or be on the lookout, I think especially to people who don't know who you are, Nemo, if they haven't seen any of your videos or know what type of person you are, I see where Jane is coming from with the like potential danger in that, because I think I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but I know in the US people who are or do security can often have a stereotype of gruff or like wannabe cops, or just people who get off on having authority and just really want to be messed with so that they can have an excuse to show a display of, I don't know, manliness or gruffness or whatever, and protectiveness. And so especially when you wrap that with Mormonism and the feeling that the church is being persecuted and I need to protect them from evil anti-Mormons and apostates. Again, if they don't know, if they haven't seen your channel and they don't know anything about you, then just the fact that your picture's there and that people are being told to look out for you, in their mind it could seem a lot dangerous. And it would to me, because just by the way, in all of the security work I've done, anytime a bolo has been made for somebody is usually out of a fear of like potential violence either or aggressiveness. Like its safety is the number one concern, although I could see a secondary concern being disruption. That would also make, I think, a bit more sense for potential, like what they would actually generally potentially fear from you rather than actual obvious violence. But again, presenting that to, again, I don't know how well trained the staff are in security, it just would appear to be a lot more dangerous. And that's the idea it would give to me, that if your pictures being brought up, this is bad and this is somebody to watch out for. So there is potential danger in that if somebody did see you of just kind of being a little bit overboard in their duties and their protectiveness of the church.
I've seen a look come across Julian's face. Before I ask him what it means, I'm just going to thank Richard Jones for his very generous donation. Thank you very much for your support. Go on, Julian.
No, I was thinking of something completely different. I'm sorry, my brain was somewhere else. So Laura doesn't know that I'm doing this tonight. She's just arrived, and I was thinking, should I just let her come in? Because she'll just think it's us having like a regular Brick Vengers chat. We do this all the time, and she'll just come and say hello and won't realise that she's live on YouTube. How cruel would that be for me to do that?
Yeah.
Not cruel at all. Just
not
cruel.
We want to see Laura. Mark Johnson's saying in the chat, the only other bolo that has been used in the UK church before was for someone who was threatening a 70 with violence. So am I on that same level? I don't think so.
I was gonna say, like, with just a picture, I wouldn't call it a real bolo, because I mean, in real security, a bolo would have a lot more information about you, like your height and weight and other things potentially about you that would help people either spot you or know like what kind of person you are, etc. So,
but maybe someone.
I don't want to give the
Yeah.
I don't want to give the impression that it was a legitimate bolo, but it still might have been used.
It might be used for that purpose. I mean, Sarah's saying in the chat that someone could just have the hots for me in the pageant office, and that's
we have discussed that thoroughly. Yeah, we have, but
the thirst may be real.
In the event you get tased, obviously the world will be the world will be informed, and we will both be horrified and laugh our asses off.
Yeah. So we'll let you know as we learn more.
Don't tase that man like that. It is a joke. No tasing Nemo, please, because he's a sweetheart.
Don't tase me, please.
Okay.
Should we get on with the pageant? Should we get on with the pageant? Let's do it. All right. Okay. So I'm going to be showing clips tonight for the purpose of review, critique. They asked for our feedback. Let's give our feedback. Here we go. Yeah, we removed the clips. If you hadn't heard, essentially I was contacted directly by a member of the pageant leadership team who explained to me the licensing and waiver issues that this video created for them, and they requested very politely that I remove the clips from the video, which is what I've done, hence why I'm talking to you now. I want to stress the member of the pageant leadership in question did not want the whole video taken down, because they appreciated our commentary and discussion. And I sort of had a feeling this would happen, which is why after the first clip, I explained what we'd just seen, in case I had to take the clips out. Unfortunately, after that, I sort of forgot to do that again. So for those scenes, you will now be treated to my descriptions of what happened instead.
Nemo, you're muted.
I have muted myself. I did an RFM. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to...
Maven.
It's having Maven around. Causes these issues. I'm just going to really quickly explain what we saw, just in case it has to be removed due to copyright claims. So, essentially, what we saw was an introduction of several characters, and then Arthur Ashton, the narrator, who kind of walks us through it, along with a sort of ensemble of younger people later on. But the key thing to know about Arthur Ashton right away is he is a composite character. So every time he's saying, my story starts here, it is the story of my daughter, Sarah, They're not real people. They're based on real diaries and real experiences of people, but they're composite. They come from several different individuals. So, yes, it is a true story in the sense that it happened to someone, but there isn't an Arthur Ashton that you should be kind of really pegging your sort of faith in. Julian, what was your reaction to that that quote at the end?
Can I read it for you, just in case?
Yes, yeah.
Brilliant. I kind of feel like we could just do this and then end it. Okay, so this is what he says. He says, if you do some real searching, what you once thought to be nonsense turns out to be truth.
What do you make of that?
I think that someone, when they were typing up the script, did a little typo there and muddled up a couple of words. I think it's supposed to say, do some real searching, what you once thought to be truth turns out to be nonsense. I'll leave
well, yeah. You're just going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Right. But yeah, I see that, there is this idea that they're really pegging in that, like this is about truth and it's that whole Mormon thing of it. And if you really ask, like, and what we say means real, not you think you might be sincere, but no. By our standards, you have to really, really ask, and then you're gonna get your answer.
Yeah, sorry,
I had those flavors.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They don't mean that at all, do they? When they say some real search, and I love the fact that they've even put the word real in there. If you do some real searching, what they mean is, if you do some soul search, you look in. If you listen to that feeling that you've got, then, you can ignore everything that's telling you that it's nonsense and, then kind of decide that it's truth. But, this whole thing, that the word truth just comes up so many. I mean, the title is Truth Will Prevail, isn't it? It's almost like if we say it enough times, will that make it true somehow? It's bizarre.
And it is this whole idea, that there's this banner that gets unfurled at the beginning. It says "Truth will prevail," and there's this kind of chant of "Truth will prevail." And I was at a wedding where some pageant people were, and that was a shout given during a photograph. And it's become this kind of war cry, this mantra of of British Mormons, particularly this whole idea, well, the truth will prevail. But the problem is, what's being peddled often isn't the truth. Well, certainly not all of it.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, please.
Too. Just the when Julian talked about real searching versus soul searching, I thought that was a great comment, and it occurred to me that probably for more than one reason, it benefits the church in doing these pageants to have these composite characters, as you said, because this was something that I noticed once leaving the church, and that was that almost anything that you take another look at closely and do any, real searching, if we're talking about not the soul kind, but in actual records, almost everything looks a lot worse. Most people's stories, there's something problematic in there. And so I think it's really useful that you don't have a real character that you can kind of Google. Well, I guess there are some real ones that will come up, but when it comes to these character stories, and
Peter will be keeping
really
us
beneficial.
Peter will be keeping us updated with which one of those became polygamists after they left the UK,
all of
because
them.
pretty much all of them. If anyone is a real male character,
or they became polygamists,
essentially.
And the women.
Just before we go to Jane, I think this is a frustration I have with apologists, where they say, look, history is messy, people are messy. I'm like, yeah, that's true, that's fine. So why were we presented with such a clean-cut version of things for so many years? You can say, yes, people were messy and things were messy and difficult. Absolutely, I agree with you. But we were given something very clean, very pure, very sanitized for a long time. Jane?
So we haven't even started watching the pageant, and a lot of the comments are reflecting exactly what my attitude was. And I went, I've seen it before, and I was fully 100% there for it. However, and I stress my reason for not liking the pageant as a piece of work, in fact, for utterly detesting the pageant as a piece of work, is that it's because I'm a snob. I don't consider it worthy of the title of theatre or any of those things, because it's all just in the same ways we're taught to write journals for someone else. This was acting where the truth wasn't really being discovered within the characters' own hearts. It was soliloquies, and that this was all for you. This was all for the audience, and I feel like, while it is very, very snobby of me, musical theatre is a big no-no, but it's my guilty pleasure. I like it. There is a place for it, but I know exactly what I'm getting into with it, and that's what Mormon pageants seem to do. It's a place where we're going to feel really, really good. We're going to feel the spirit. It's like the movies that do sort of it's emotion porn. The way they manipulate my emotions, I don't like it. It turns me off. That's the same feeling I have about the pageant. So I go in very negative about it. But to be absolutely fair, you can see from the get-go, this is very, very high quality. The lighting, the sound, the whole production of even it being streamed was superb, was absolutely exquisite. So much work has gone in behind the scenes, and while we're not talking about the acting specifically, in general, that you could see the work that has gone into that. So I definitely want to shout out there are no real sort of historical issues at the beginning of the play. We are here to tell you this story. So immediately though, I have this tension of, this is what I just chunter my way through the play.
Can I raise a point as a pageant person, as it were? So I never performed in the pageant. I used to perform in there's an auxiliary show called Our Story Goes On, which is the outreach show that is specifically designed for non-members. It uses musical theatre tunes and other such things to kind of share the gospel message with people. So it's called Our Story Goes On. It started in Nauvoo, it got brought here, and it toured around the UK, and I was part of touring it. I went to quite a few. So I know a lot of these people on stage, and when we were doing our watch party on Friday, I was like, I know them. And these are some very talented individuals. And the acting or the performative nature of this, they're not really acting. They're not getting into George Cannon and becoming George Cannon and presenting George Cannon on stage. They're using the character of George Cannon as a vehicle to proselytize to the audience. And that's kind of what you're taught to do. There's a very certain way of delivering lines that they want. There's a very overly emotional way, a lot of breathing, a lot of like, they want lots of range in your voice up and down all the time. They want to keep it interested. I was told at one point, like you're reading a children's book to someone, right? That's how that was a stage direction I was given. Yeah.
You didn't tell me that. That is.
Yeah. I wanted to get a live reaction from our resident drama teacher, Jane. So, but my point is, any sort of criticisms you have of people here, even to like the accents that people are doing, they will have been told, we want you to do this accent, regardless of whether they can do it or not. They will have been told, we want this accent from your character, and everything is. Well, the Spirit, it's all under this thing of, well, the Spirit says that this is the person you're meant to play, and it's all couched in this very Mormon language. So, yeah, that's just what I want to say. I'm not here to criticize any of those individuals. I have a lot of love for a lot of those people on that stage still. A lot of people I would consider friends, and they are some very talented people. The choir was phenomenal.
Oh.
The direction on the choir, some of the parts where they should have been driving forward, they were pulling back, and those sorts of things we can discuss. But the quality of the choir was phenomenal. The quality of the production was great. So I don't want anyone to think that we're just bagging on the pageant and saying people were really, really bad.
I don't know anyone in the pageant, so I would be happy to bag on it.
Go on, Peter.
Yeah. It's such a passion project. You know, we've all got friends and family, or most of us have, who've participated or are in it. You know, one of the major director people is related to me. Lots of my cousins went and saw it this time round again. We actually went to see it tied in with one of our family reunions. We happened to be in the area last time it was on. And it was a great family experience. So that joy, that fun, that cultural thing. And it's great that a pageant has survived the cull of the pageants by President Nelson, that he just eviscerated loads of them, but then had a massive pageant for his own birthday at the church conference centre at the same time as he was spoiling everyone else's fun. And pageants are a big part of Mormon expression creatively, artistically. We don't get to do road shows anymore. This is all the last remnant of what used to be a really vivid tradition in Mormon culture of expressing yourself through performance and theatre, and a lot of it hammy and overacting and whatever, but a hoot. You know, it's a way to bring the community together and tell stories. So there's so much, you know, there's a lot of loss here. There's quite a bit of pathos in a way. Absolutely, we can eviscerate the major problems with how it's all written and what they've left out and how it could have been so much better, which we can get to. And also the big question of, well, who's it for? Is it just for Mormon insiders to pat themselves on the back? Or is it meant to be an outreach, a missionary effort? Because they pile on millions of missionaries on the final scene on stage. And so much of it is basically trying to earnestly convey truth. We've got the truth. It may be weird, but pray about it, you'll find the truth. It's framed like a missionary discussion. You're saying that the other thing our story goes on is meant to be the one for non-members.
Yeah.
I disagree with you totally. This is entirely scripted to be a tool to get people.
Well, I mean, they can both be, because Our Story Goes On was written and designed on a secular basis.
But this is as well. I'm just pointing out that this is really meant to do that, and I think it fails horribly for several reasons. It's just so. And over the top and too much, and not
whereas the rest of our
reasons to
incredibly successful.
Yeah.
We've got people in the chat saying when we're going to get started on the trafficking. So let's crack on with having a look at Heber C. Kimball, shall we? And we'll read some of his quotes later. But here's Heber C. Kimball. Sarah Ashton and her siblings are talking to Heber C. Kimball. Her younger brother challenges the idea that a young man can receive a vision, despite his sister's belief. He gets told by Heber C. Kimball that yes, he could receive a vision too, or it might be something different. Straight away is that, you notice how we said that it's true, she turns to the audience, and this is what we're talking about, this whole it's for the audience. They're breaking the fourth wall constantly to address the audience directly and push these points. Also, the red flag that jumped up for me immediately, I don't know if anyone else saw it, was the idea that, oh, you might get a vision, or it could be something else, because his whole question was, well, if he's my age and he can get called as a prophet, will I get the same thing? it's a reasonable question, and he gets the, well, you might, but it's probably going to be something else, and that's okay too. It's that total like subversion of expectations of the questioner who's like, well, can I have the same example? And they're like, well, yes, but no. And then Heber C. Kimball, we'll see through some later clips, but his relationship with young girls is problematic, and the fact that there's this young girl who wants to be baptized and is going to go to America based on the back of his teachings is what brings us to a lot of this trafficking angle. Jane's got a statement on what trafficking is, so I'm going to let her read that out.
Yeah, just because I think it's really important to clarify what we're defining as trafficking, because I mean, it's a pretty heady word here, but if you're going to pay attention to the historical element of the pageant, and also if you're going to pay any attention to what happens today in missionary work, 21st century saints also do a lot of work around with organizations who work with trafficking issues. So first of all, and this will just take a moment, really important thing here is called the Palermo Protocol, and the protocol is to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transactional Organised Crime. The protocol, which is in force, was signed by the United Kingdom in December 2000, ratified in 2006, and it outlines what the accepted standard is for trafficking here. Article 3 of the protocol defines trafficking as trafficking in persons shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harbouring or receipt of persons by means of threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability of the giving or receiving of payments. Just a little piece of interesting context for you all there, so you can make the decision yourself.
A lot of the deception comes up due to the idea that a lot of these people, including John Taylor, I believe, was going around saying that polygamy doesn't happen, polygamy is not a thing, when it absolutely was going on. And so these young women, as we're going to see, these young women go with him to America, and they have no idea that polygamy is what's waiting for them. Maven, and then we'll pull up a quote by Heber C. Kimball.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is a bit of a tangent, but just from the line, one thing that had stood out to me was the line that God trusts young people. And I just thought that was interesting, given that all the top leadership of the church is basically a gerontocracy. So
that's a very good point.
I just found that interesting as well. Yeah, the Lord trusts young people, but he doesn't trust them to lead the church at all. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, from 14-year-olds to 90-year-olds. And Sam makes an interesting point in the comments, says that even if someone originally consents but later wants to leave but is not allowed to, that's trafficking as well. And the problem is, once they had involved themselves in that religious community in Nauvoo and later on in Utah, it was very difficult for them to leave. They had no means whereby they could leave again once they'd discovered what it was that awaited them.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think Heber C. Kimball had 43 wives. And we'll get to his delicious quote in a minute about, how he viewed people going on missions to Britain. And it's such a jarring thing. When I was growing up, the major sort of narrative, certainly historically, about the Mormons was they're coming to Britain to capture young women and scurry them off to polygamous marriages in Utah. And that was the major accusation. It seems so completely removed from all the stories I was hearing in primary and youth and seminary about these people and their heroic conversions and how they became the backbone of the church in Nauvoo and then in Utah, for these British converts, how important they were. But the more you actually learn about the history of polygamy, the anti-Mormons were completely right. What would I do if going back in time? I'd be running around warning these young girls, you are going to find yourself within a year or two, maybe 5, in a situation where you are being heavily coerced to marry often very much older men who already have several wives, who are not going to be able to afford to support you. You're going to be relocated to the desert. you're going to be in extreme isolation and poverty, trying to scratch out some kind of subsistence farming existence in a wilderness, at the whim of Brigham Young deciding he wants cities everywhere. And if you try to come home, there will be this huge movement of where everyone's getting rebaptized, the Mormon Reformation, when everyone went seriously fundamentalist. And there was an intense pressure on everyone in the church to get polygamous. That anyone who wasn't polygamously married was told to get another wife, because they were teaching at the time you had to be polygamous to get to heaven. And at that point, they started marrying the young teenagers. They were hoovering up all the younger girls. And just normalized that, which Joseph Smith in his private life already had, although most people didn't know that.
And you have to, because most societies are pretty much 50-50 male and female. So it happens over and over and over again. That part of why teen and child brides is such a problem in polygamy is for that very reason. The women start getting taken up, and so if you've got your eye on somebody, the younger you can snatch them up. That's what you want. You got to do if you want to get them.
It's just this race to the bottom in terms of age.
Yeah. And there was one of my side hobbies is collecting old newspapers from the 1800s about the Mormons. So in British newspapers as well as American ones, there's this absolute fascination with these weird people who are white, but they were doing all the stuff the pagan heathens of the darker regions of the planet did in their very racist worldview at the time. They were doing polygamy and all these things that were seen as uncivilized. And there was a morbid curiosity, and the news from Utah was being featured. They'd send journalists. There'd be these amazing portraits of Brigham Young and the Apostles and the buildings of Salt Lake in newspapers in Britain and other places. But also a huge movement of anti-Mormon propaganda, quite intense and virulent. And of course, the first Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes story was about trying to rescue someone who'd been trafficked as a Mormon convert, studying Scarlet. So it's embedded in our culture in Britain, that we got raided by these American Mormons who came and took people, and that's how they ended up. And all the awful stories of slavery and polygamy sort of began to filter back. And when the church officially went public with polygamy, the convert baptism machine that this pageant is celebrating stopped almost immediately. It crashed. As soon as the church admitted they were doing polygamy, these thousands and thousands of converts, joining the church and crossing the Atlantic, it dried up almost overnight. And we've since then in Britain had to spend a century in the 20th century rebuilding from absolute scratch, from annihilation, from having all our brightest and best converts go and then end up in the polygamous royal families of Utah. Powerful and successful in their own way, unless they were women. And we've gone on this journey where we had to spend a whole century really in Britain trying to distance ourselves from that narrative, from that reality. But now what's happening is we're having another exodus from the church, as modern members of the church are finding how much was hidden from them about that, how it really was sex trafficking. And they were doing it blatantly. They were lying to the people here, denying that polygamy was a thing when the rumors spread around the world. And then as soon as they got to Utah, they're told, oh, actually, it is a thing. Here's your husband. And you can't escape.
Well, should we look at what Heber C. Kimball said about it?
Follow through. Yeah.
Let's look at Heber C. Kimball's quote. So, Heber C. Kimball said, and it was reported in the New York Times in April 1860, "Brethren, I want you to understand that it is not to be as it has been heretofore. The brother missionaries have been in the habit of picking out the prettiest women for themselves before they get here and bringing on the ugly ones for us. Hereafter, you have to bring them all here before taking any of them, and let us all have a fair shake." It's pretty disgusting. And to be honest, if you want more of that sort of stuff, I did an episode with Julia from Analyzing Mormonism and with Sam from Zelf on the Shelf on the Mormon Stories podcast. Go check that out. We covered the trafficking element of this in great detail, but we'll keep referring to those sorts of things. The other story I want to tell about Heber C. Kimball before I show some of his preaching is a story whereby he blessed the first child born into the UK church. The first child born into the UK church was a girl called Mary Smithies in Lancashire. And at 2 weeks old, Heber C. Kimball held her in his arms and blessed her, as baby blessing, just like any other. 19 years later, he would marry her as a polygamous bride. same baby that he held in his arms,
Yikes.
he would go on to marry as a polygamous bride. That is the man that's being celebrated here in these clips and is being used here to shoehorn the first vision into the pageant. So let's take a look. This scene starts with what many people will recognise as the first discussion, but it was supposedly taught by Heber C. Kimball. They also bring up the quote from Tyndale, one of the reformers, about a boy who driveth the plough, and they compare it to Joseph Smith, naturally. So they're just, we'll pause it real quick here. What they're doing here is they're taking the words of Tyndale and they're essentially shoehorning them to fit a Mormon narrative. They're saying, oh, look, the reformers predicted Mormonism. Isn't that wonderful? Because Joseph Smith drove the plough and so did Tyndale say. Yeah. They're just co-opting the reformers for their own use. Let's carry on. Here they continue with the story of the first vision being taught by Heber C. Kimball. And they have the LDS hymn Joseph Smith's First Prayer underneath, with the music gradually swelling until you reach a crescendo, which is designed to elicit elevation emotion in those who are watching. So there's a lot of heart selling that, and a trope that I know Jane will want to talk about. Go on, Jane.
Oh, I was just going to say that, you know, and I was talking about this during our watch party on Friday night, that we've been telling the story of the first vision, you know, since it started to be reproduced, and as that started to be performed dramatically, particularly as the, you know, BYU movie factory started happening, and production started sort of becoming more accessible. That story has been told with the same language, with the same lighting, with the same background music, building to a little heartfelt crescendo for years. We haven't progressed our telling of that. And I think this is why I get really excited about theatre and acting and the possibility of that, how people define God, how people define religious experiences. Now, you have all this funding for technology and the ability to do not even just sort of visually with music, but also with the words, because Joseph Smith's story, you know, those accounts are now, there are various accounts. Do you think we could have done something with that that made it maybe more honest? Could we progress it? And so we tell Joseph Smith's story and we make it sound like he's saying those exact words, that this is literally what happened, while everyone does their sort of Joseph Smith moment of gazing upward into the light, and the audience are having this moment of you having this sacred, heartfelt, hand-wringing experience. And it's just, that's the contrived part. You don't have to do this to tell a story anymore. That isn't truth.
And it's this heart cell thing. Go on. Yeah.
Just as a missionary, this was something that we memorized was this story, and then also practiced. Like, I legitimately had in the MTC, and then also occasionally in zone or district meetings, role playing, specifically practicing this, you know, telling the first vision spiritually, and we were totally using the spirit voice and the soft pauses and the, you know, all of it, the soft voice, everything.
Yeah, and the thing is
that performative nature was all like,
yeah,
it was very common,
and even engagement with it is even scripted, right, Maven? Like you guys are taught not just how to deliver the story, how to build that crescendo. It's the same one you hear during testimony meetings, and you know, people will just switch into Mormon gear. The problem is, and I feel like I'm being really mean about it, because it works in a lot of ways. The problem for me is that your audiences, we have become smarter, we have become more mature and more refined. We expect more, and we can tell when you do that. And nowadays, the effect tends to be to switch us off. It just, we don't like it. Now, if you're a Mormon and that's your language, yeah, they're engaged, they're there. But visitors seeing that, you know, it's very, very manipulative, and they feel that they're being manipulated.
Mm-hmm. I really like Coco B's comment here. It raises an interesting question. Heber C. Kimball arrived at the docks in Liverpool in 1837. The famous account of the first vision of Joseph Smith was 1838. So that account that they're portraying there, that one that we love to hold on to, and we're not really willing yet to put publicly, the other accounts wouldn't have been the one he would have been teaching if he was teaching that at all.
Correct. And also, just to extend that, not only was the first vision not taught, the restoration wasn't taught. The Truth Will Prevail was a church publication book, if anyone has a copy of it, and it talks about how the restoration wasn't taught. What was heavily focused on was selling the Book of Mormon, was the scriptural component of it, that this book has been found, and also the abstinence movement, no drinking alcohol, so these sort of clean living, access to it would have been quite sort of almost like new technology, like there's something continuing here, but it was not in terms of a continuing restoration and the way they're drawing that line.
I think what we should go to next is the is the relationship that Heber develops with this Sarah Ashton, who again isn't a real person, but someone's said in the comments George Watt does get a mention in this. We don't have the clip, but George Watt is the first person famously raced across the bridge in order to be the first person to be baptized. All the big hoo-ha. How many wives? 7, Peter?
6.
George Watt?
6
wives he ended up with.
He was also he was also interesting. He was the Pittman shorthand guy who recorded the talks in General Conference that became the basis of discourses of the prophets and so on. The journals of discourses. So but he ended up having 6 wives. Okay. Can I just say a couple of things on watching that? Where they're retelling. There's the story within the story. It's really hard to take that seriously, having seen the Book of Mormon musical. Because it's exactly like, where they put on the story of the Mormon history with the two voices, sort of one supporting the other voice and so on. I'm assuming they must have gone and seen the Nauvoo pageant or something where they had a similar thing going on, because it's almost identical to sort of the whole over-the-top satirical format of how they tell the story of the weird version of Mormon history in the Book of Mormon musical. But also, it's just this general problem that they're talking about a load of stuff that means nothing whatsoever to a secular, normal person. They're using all this insider jargon, the first vision, the authority restored, the priesthood, and all these key talking points that we did on our missions. But when you get a bit of distance from it, or you look at it objectively and think, what would a normal human being who hasn't encountered Mormonism before think here? You're just seeing some people incredibly intense and passionate about stuff that's completely meaningless to you.
And this is why
they're not doing enough to make it relevant. They're not.
This is why we're talking about
this matters.
You were saying that this is a convert experience. I think this is actually. I think the pageant is confused as to who it's for, because it is for members. In its dialogue, in its delivery, in its, but then it's also trying to get non-members to feel something. It's using that inclusive language. They think it's testifying exactly. They say friends. Friends has become the new euphemism for investigators in the Mormon Church, and it just feels incredibly disingenuous. Julian?
So I hate musical theatre. I hate anything like that. It drives me crazy. But I did when I was. I've never been to the British Pageant. But when I was like a faithful LDS, I did go to see the Nauvoo pageant. And even though I hate it, and I went there while I was visiting my brother, who probably has an equal disdain for that kind of thing. He obviously wanted me to see it. And I went and I loved it, and I really felt moved by it all. And the thing is, like Jane said, we're so used to this. When we're in the church, we're so used to this kind of thing that we've become very much desensitized to it. So we do get that feeling. I strongly believe that it is aimed more at kind of strengthening the members than anything else. But once you step out of it, all the things that we've just discussed are just so true. It's so clear that it is done. It's there to brainwash us, basically, to make us have these feelings. And for the people that are involved, it will be an absolute life-changing experience, and they will and I think something else that's important about that is, correct me if I've got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure the people that are involved, all the actors, they're making a massive sacrifice with it, a sacrifice of time,
they're unpaid,
sacrifice financially as well. You know, they'll be that it's all unpaid, and if you're a major cast member, you know, then you're going to be taking time out off work to do this. And so, you know, it's a really good way of kind of solidifying their testimonies, because, you know, when you make such a big sacrifice for something, you don't want to kind of, you know, you don't want to look at it in any kind of critical way.
But then there are people from the pageant that have left.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Of course. And, you know, they won't talk about it.
Just talking about a few, right?
Yeah. The pageant seems to burn people out in a way. So I think you're absolutely right, Julian, that when people... Go on, Maven.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be, like, I agree that I don't think missionary work is the primary purpose, or even, I'm not even sure it's a secondary purpose, but the idea or the thought that it is the primary purpose is what I think drives. That would we be doing these pageants? I mean, a lot of people love to do these kinds of things anyway, but would we be as passionate? Would so many people sacrifice as much if it really was known to be just a pageant for us to relive our history or whatever? It just occurs to me, and I wonder what you guys think, if the whole point is for the cast and the supporting crew to think that it's a missionary effort, in order to provide the motivation to do it.
It's the same as real missionary work. You're told that you're there to go and bring souls unto Christ. The reality is you're probably not going to bring anyone into the church, and it's really just there to solidify your position in the church by having you constantly butt your head against the brick wall that is the world, and show how the world will reject you, and so your only solace is within the church. So stay with us, stay in our in-group, because you've been into the big bad scary world. No one likes you, no one wants to listen to your message, so you just get further entrenched. Missions are there almost to convert the missionary rather than they are to convert anyone else. Julian?
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, you know, unless you live in the north of England, you know, so obviously that the one that was live streamed, there were lots of people there from Scotland. You know, so this is quite a commitment for them to go. You know, and
youth camps from all around the country have taken their youth up there to go see it. You know,
of course, and so there's also an element to it of kind of righteousness. You know,
pilgrimage.
You know, oh no, I didn't go. He's got, well, why? Why wouldn't you go to that? You know, it's almost like going to the temple. You know, and so it serves loads of functions. Laura, a couple of, must probably have been about 6 years ago now, was asked to be one of the seamstresses for it, to help make costumes. And the guy that called, I have no idea who he was, but he phoned her up and asked her to do this. And he set her apart on the phone. So you know, he had a conversation with her and said, you know, would you be willing to do this?
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Well, I just wonder why that couldn't have worked during COVID then, because that was definitely not a thing then.
No, I didn't realise we could perform those ordinances by phone. They set her apart. This guy set her apart on the phone, which, aside from the kind of just the bizarreness of doing that, you know, again, it's another layer. This is a calling. You've been called. We're not asking you to do it because we heard you all right. So we're giving you a calling, and you know, of course, we know that all the callings come from God as well. You know, so God is asking you to make costumes,
sacrifices. Yeah,
bonkers. All of that is tied up in it.
Yeah, can I want to? I'm going to change the direction we're going in.
Laura's just come in to inform me that she hasn't been released.
She hasn't been released.
Yeah.
Oh, well, can you sew me one of those nifty-looking pilgrim outfits then?
Some stuff. Yeah.
I want a red waistcoat.
Yeah. So let's have a look at this clip.
Prairie bonnet.
Let's have a look at this clip of the Bembos. Speaking of sacrifices. The Bembos offer to pay for the printing of 5,000 more copies of the Book of Mormon using Jane Bembo's inheritance. This is a device to show the popularity and therefore implied truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. Her inheritance to pay for the printing of the Book of Mormon. These are the sorts of sacrifices people were giving to something they didn't fully understand, because they were only getting a version of it that was taught to them by these missionaries who came from America. They didn't realise. Do we know what happened to the Bembos in terms of polygamy? Moving on, Peter?
Yeah, not sure about. Well, Hannah Ellis lived with them, and I think she was one of Joseph Smith's wives, and would come to stay at their house for conjugal visits.
Right.
So basically their home became the shag pad for Joseph with one of his many plural wives. It's an interesting historical tidbit from that.
Okay.
But what immediately really made me livid listening to that was they're still doing it. When we were tracking the donations of the British saints to specific funds, to the Temple Funds, to humanitarian aid, to the Perpetual Education Fund, to the Book of Mormon Fund, we know that thousands and thousands of pounds were donated by often little elderly ladies on their pensions, because I shoveled that money into envelopes as a ward clerk for years, in order to have Book of Mormons printed. That sacrifice was still being made now in the 21st century. And
by a church with
$150
billion.
Yeah. And they never spent it on the Book of Mormons. They just hoarded it all, earned interest on the money in a bank account for 10 years, and then shuffled it all off to Salt Lake a couple of years ago. When we could have had that. And you and I know, as missionaries, Book of Mormons were actually in short supply. We were rationed.
We never had enough.
You know, you had to plead with the office to get another box of the Book of Mormons. And none of this joins up. You know, when you start to just scratch below the surface a little bit, the idea that if the church genuinely cared about the Book of Mormon, they could just post one to every person in the country. It would cost a tiny microscopic drop in the ocean of gold that they have. And if, you know, we have literal videos like Carrera Possession with Vincenzo Di Francesca coming across a Book of Mormon without a cover and being converted by it. If the church genuinely believed that if you just spam the world with Book of Mormons, a few people would read it and a percentage of those would join the church, which they would, why has every home in the country not been posted a Book of Mormon? It's the same as, like, they've got this money and they're buying 2% of Florida to build a massive city in Florida, which is quite flat, will be one of the first states in the USA to go under the rising sea. But they're not spending that money creating a metropolis in Missouri where the New Jerusalem's meant to be.
Peter, can I just
none
swear
of it joins
right
up.
now?
It's
Jane wants to join in.
nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, just if the churches are listening, and take that on as an idea to post a Book of Mormon to every house in the United Kingdom, I will tase you, pal, to not give them that terrible idea.
I
you don't
want to jump in too. Just on the inheritance thing, I think in general the church is still doing it. I was kind of thinking, I thought we were on the same page, but you actually went a different direction. The church is still taking people's inheritances through their sacrifice, and in more ways than one. I know this is, I guess, me being American centric, or I guess taking it back to Utah. Utah, I think, is dead last, or possibly second to last in retirement savings per capita. And just financially, the church requires so much, and it also requires so much time. And especially for women, if you do the good Mormon woman thing and you're home with the kids, you're not also earning a second income, which many families really, really could use. But if you're the ones who are able to do that, they're also kind of shooting themselves in the foot financially that way. So retirement in general is already like really, really low. And then with inheritance, we even have in the comments, someone mentioned a lot of parents will pass on their money to the church instead of to their children, especially if they're apostate. But even some faithful children will still only get a fraction. And the church actively, I think, recruits still to get basically inheritances from people once they pass on. So this is something that the church is still doing to take advantage of members. Again, that they're willingly giving and sacrificing because they really think it's going to a good cause, and they also really think that if they're in dire need at the end of their lives, the church will help them out, when that's not the case with most of them.
Well, Maxine Kennedy has just sent
to spend.
Sorry, I'm just going to shout out Maxine Kennedy, who has just sent her money to a good cause. So thank you very much, Maxine, for your very generous donation. Thank you.
Thanks, Maxine.
Go on.
And the other way they're taking...
Well, hang on, Peter. Jane first. Jane first. Ladies first, Peter. You know the rules.
Yeah, this is a patriarchy. I think you'll find you just need to wait. No, the thing with the inheritance moment is that there is actually a bit of a pattern. I feel really bad about this because there's actually some really good things to be said about this, about the pageant experience, but this moment was, I think, one of the moments that takes your breath away, because this is what would happen. The church would, as an organisation, would have to hit up its members for financial support. And it would not be the only time. Later on, there will be another time. Well, what do we need the money for now? First it's the Book of Mormon. Now it's a temple. We're going to need to come back and hit you up some more. And this is the pattern that the especially early church, but I mean it does happen today. Your sacrifice will never be enough. There's always something more that you need to be giving that you have not yet done, and is that more important to you than supporting the church in its mission? We covenant about that in the temple. It's already given anyway in our hearts. And to some of the points, those sacrifices, they have consequences. That these may have been people who were better prepared to encounter the hardships as they crossed the plains, if they were able to perhaps manage or distribute their own funds as they saw fit. Maybe it would have just looked very, very different. Pageant performers, in that same spirit of giving and as of sacrifice, have really traumatic experiences going back into sort of the not just going back into the real world after the pageant, that real sort of come down that happens, that actors are sort of more looked after. They know what to expect. This is the pattern of going back into a time when you're no longer in this little bubble. So people can be traumatized when that comes to an end, and keeping relationships online, that's not the same thing. You're not looking after them as an organization if that's what you're doing. But in addition to that, people processing what they have been testifying of with their whole body, their whole spirit, repeatedly, night after night, at that level, it is very, very traumatic. And there is a reason why so much of even just going back to the 2020 cast of the pageant have left the church. It's just so tough.
One sec, Peter, we're going to move to the next clip.
They're asking elderly people to spend 20 grand to serve a mission, and now they're trying to pressurize them to do too. That's their inheritance gone again. That's their own pension. That's their care when they get a dementia and need to be in a home gone. The resources to give them a comfortable end to their life.
Julian?
It's being harvested by the church up to the last minute.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well. One of the things that I hear, I've heard several times, is the number of members that retire and then spend a lot of their time at the temple. You know, lovely thing to do, but it means they're not spending that time with their grandchildren. You know, they're not spending that time with their family. You know, it's all kind of geared towards this life that comes after this that we don't really know anything about, you know, and these people that have died that don't really need us, because none of that makes any actual sense. And they're missing out, you know, it's a massive sacrifice. They're missing out on spending that time with their grandkids. I think that's a real shame.
Right, well, let's have a look at the story of someone else who kind of put the church before their family. This comes in two parts. So the first part is, again, Sarah Ashton, not a real person, but composite character, talking about how she wants to become baptized. And then the second time is she wants to go to America. But so let's look at this first. Sarah Ashton is asking her father for permission to be baptized because, and I quote, she's had a feeling. And as they say in unison whilst addressing the audience directly through the fourth wall, feelings are always to be trusted. So based on nothing more than a feeling, Arthur Ashton allows Sarah to be baptized. There you go. She had a feeling and that was enough. That's it. She had a feeling.
Feelings can
Time
be
to get
trusted.
Baptized. Feelings should always be trusted. And notice how they turned to the audience and said it directly to the audience. Your feelings are always to be trusted. After they've been doing so much to instigate elevation emotion and intense feelings in the audience through big swelling music, they're like, see that feeling we've given you? Trust it. It means the church is true. It's almost it's almost respectable how open they're trying to be in manipulating the audience. Jane?
Britain being the land of carry-on films. Mark Johnson in the comments. Yeah, you get exactly why a British person did not have sole writing control over that script, or that is not a sentence we would be using.
Indeed.
I bust a gut for about 20 minutes after they said that line, repeatedly, just to make it worse. This actually was reflective for me of the writing of the pageant and where that, I think, is the weak link here, because it is the American view of how British people would have portrayed it. And great, you've had input, great, you've ran it past all of these people. I don't care what your relationship is to the United Kingdom. This is not a British story. And it feels a little bit like, when you have this tension with people who are planning to join the church and uproot their lives, the big sort of tension that was being revealed wasn't about employment or poverty, or the fact that the missionaries were actually there in the first place to try and convert some wealthy people to the church. It wasn't about there was a sort of financial motivation for them. The people who were listening were people who were not affluent generally, who were it was a melting pot of social situations that were happening that led to them leaving. But we have this real beautiful moment of a child who wants to convert, and the father is not giving permission for that baptism to take place. Now, that happened like an episode, not even of the Waltons. Like, it was just so, well, I don't agree. And he's happily shaking hands.
Jim Bob.
Being best friends with Heber, you lovely guy. No, these people were hounded out of towns and villages because they saw this as really predatory. They were recognizing it, even back then. So I think that the lack of tension, which would have shown this part of the truth of that's what it is often still like for people who are converting into the church. Families are really, really worried. It looks like when people go to go get on the boat, it looks like when people are converting to the church, there's no more thought that has gone into it than we would give thought to taking a holiday to Australia today. We're going to head off, and isn't this lovely? Well, I don't think you should be going. I'm going to spend my inheritance in this trip. This is as simple as it is. There's no tension, and that was a moment where we should have seen it.
And there's 2 points I'd make to that. The first was, I agree, a lot of these like big scenes, particularly like dancing around the maypole and stuff that they did to show what rural Lancashire was lovely and vibrant. I was expecting someone to start going, little town, it's a quiet village. It's like the beginning of bloody Beauty and the Beast. It was just this little provincial town where everyone's running around gladly, and it's all so lovely. But the second thing, I think,
country dancing. It was ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely.
It was so cliche, twee stereotypes of each country, but no industrial revolution anywhere going on.
No, other than a reference to a child working in a factory at one point. That was all we had. But the other point I'd make is, to Jane's point, of course Mormons aren't going to model what conflict and conflict resolution look like on stage. Of course they're not, because we don't know how to do it. Contention is of the devil, so it must be avoided. So we can't even show the sort of contention. They couldn't even convincingly deliver lines about so-called Joseph Smith. They couldn't even convincingly deliver lines deriding the idea of the church, because that goes against the fundamentals that, hang on, the church is ultimately true. So it just becomes uncomfortable for them.
But
because
that's
it's uncomfortable, they won't do it.
And that's why I get so insulted about the pageant, because that is what the pageant should exist to do. That's what theatre, drama, acting, performance, that's what it does. It allows you in a safe way to try on these big ideas of conflict and help resolve them and see what works and see what doesn't, and give voice to these things that we're actually just pushing away because we don't want to go there, because we want to present a narrative. So it doubles down on this real unhealthiness. And, we're joking about the tweeness of it. It is torture to watch. Now, I remember asking you guys, is this reflective of, English culture? Because how Scottish culture, Irish culture, Welsh culture was being referred to. Like, I wore my plaid for tonight. Tartan
everywhere.
Everywhere, the headwear, and it was just ridiculous. And what ends up happening, and someone in the chat was talking about as being understood and accents and things. Yes, it is very, very difficult to understand an accent that you're not used to hearing. It takes a while to tune in. And what we do, and this is...
She said it takes a while to tune in, just so...
Feel free to use the closed captions, people. And what we do is we anglify our accents. So when you have an extremely northern accent, when you have an Irish accent, the Welsh accents, so what we do is we end up putting on a Scottish accent, even if we are Scottish, so that we can be either better understood or even worse, sound more Scottish.
So everyone sounds like Shrek. Everyone goes full.
That's
what
we do. Yeah.
Well, Shrek, Julian.
Yeah, it's a caricature, isn't it? The whole thing's a caricature, and I don't mind that. I think that's fine. I think that the problem is that the general membership doesn't accept that, and we're not encouraged to accept that. It is still put out there with this idea that this is the true story of what happened. This is what really happened. What you're seeing here, it's not just the reality, it's historical fiction, isn't it? That's what we're seeing. We're really seeing historical fiction. But we watch it and we view it as active members. We watch it and view it as if it is, actual history, as if it's a documentary almost of what happened, and that's the problem. That it's that lack of honesty. Can I ask? Obviously, we're not going to name any names. Do we know who wrote it?
We do.
Yes, I do.
Right.
But we also, I know that it was written by an individual, and then it was heavily correlated. It ran through committee after committee, went back and forth with Salt Lake. This was poured over.
And I think obviously we would expect that from anything. If it was written in Utah, it would still be, it'd still be done that way. I'm thinking about the comment that Jane said about it kind of not being a British product. But and I think I totally understand what you're saying there, but it kind of doesn't need to be, because we're taught in the church to emulate the brethren, aren't we? And we do it so well. We know it's not British, it's not American, it's Mormon, and we know how to do that. We all know the voice that we're supposed to put on. We know when to pause. We know when to do our
dramatic.
Breathy. We know how to do that. And that's one of these weird things where, Maven, earlier you mentioned about it being a gerontocracy, but we pretend there's this illusion that it's a meritocracy, well, we don't, do we? We believe that it's a theocracy. We put forward the idea that it's a theocracy, but really, a meritocracy in the idea that the people that are the top are there because they're the best. God has chosen them because they're the best, and
predestined.
And that comes all the way down. The person that is the bishop is bishop because they are the best person in a ward, or certainly they've got to be really righteous, super righteous. It's that kind of meritocracy, and we know, or we've learned. If you're raised in the church, you learn from a very early age how to gain that merit, how to the right things to say, the right way to say it. We all we learn how to give our general conference talks and all of that kind of stuff. It's just follows a pattern, doesn't it? And we've learned how to do that. And so it doesn't need to have any input from Salt Lake, because we've learned how to emulate that. We've
learned how to put something together that Salt Lake would approve of.
Yeah, but what we end up is with a version of Brigadoon. That's how the UK is being presented, and and that is really, really offensive. Whenever this is a country, that we're talking about the Industrial Revolution, arts, sciences, all of these, the law,
Reformation.
Beautiful, incredible ideas, and it's reduced to people in tartan and hoops dancing around a maypole with a note. I mean, even when they brought in Wales, should have been a glorious, and it was a nice moment. But, you know, you think about the legacy of Wales in the church, that should have been, the choir should have been hitting that, the direction on that should have been glorious. And it just kind of was nice. And, you know, so I get what you're doing. It's nice. It's a nice production. The thing with the pageant is, if it was good, it would be excellent.
But the whole thing about culture in that, though, it's, you know, in a way, we should almost be grateful for the fact that there is any kind of nod at culture, you know, because we're taught in the church to you know, we lose our culture in the church, don't we? We lose our culture.
Yeah.
We have to adopt.
Well, there was a general conference talk about how there is no culture, only the culture of Christ.
Exactly. We adopt, you know, I served my mission in London South.
Best mission.
Is the best mission in the world, or was.
Absolutely.
It doesn't exist anymore, does it?
No.
They
couldn't deal without us.
After I left, they gave up and said, "That's it. We've reached our peak. Let's just close the mission." Yeah. So you know, and I served in some very, very culturally diverse wards, but you know, there was the people in those wards. And this is just my take on it, but a lot of the people that in those wards that kind of maintained that culture, there was almost like a kind of, seen almost as kind of cute, and you know, they don't get it. They don't get it. You know, they'll start kind of following the Mormon way eventually. You know, and so, you know, any kind of window into culture other than just Mormon culture is something, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that part was strange too, when they go into the things that they're bringing, and of course it's not a double entendre, but the metaphor of seed being planted, and that was kind of weird. Seeds. Yeah. With the, to me, I was also getting seed as in children and whatnot, but it was interesting to me that the early converts portrayed in this are wanting to hold on to things about their home country and bring that to the United States, when I'm sitting here knowing that is going to be, a lot of it going to be lost in assimilation. So I didn't know how to really take that or feel about it. It was interesting to me.
I think it's a really good point to kind of look at how we essentially, we got, not only were people trafficked under the guise of there being no polygamy and based on these claims, they were taken out of their homeland to America, but then yes, they were almost forced to assimilate with an American culture, because a Mormon culture is all encompassing. It is, the Mormon church is not a religion, it's a way of life, and so you live this frontiering American way of life. There's a point that we'll come to in the next clip, where he talks about, you know, it's not a roof, is a roof over your head just going to magically appear? People have been living in these settlements where these people are living for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. You know, there are towns and cities in the UK that have existed since before memory, like before, you know, records began, you know, before the history books. London's been around as long as anyone knows. So these people have lived in these places with access to water and all these sorts of things, clean water systems, all that sort of stuff is all going on. They have their way of life, and they're going into frontier America where loads of them are going to die of cholera, loads of them are going to die of exposure to the wind and the cold and frostbite and all these sorts of things. Yeah, they were forced to become a different type of person.
In London, though, as well.
Oh, there absolutely were.
It wasn't all that good. We didn't. They didn't have inside toilets yet. But
no.
There were where
but the Romans had sewerage in Chester 1,000 years ago. Anyway,
yeah. That's true. Where we were saying that there wasn't this moment of real emotion and real tension, there was one, and we all commented it while we were watching it, but it was so problematic that they really played out tension with Mr. Ashton's daughter, as we've seen, who just wants to go to America, and he's worried that she's the mother, his wife's died, she's the mother of the children, effectively, and tearing her out of the home would destroy everything. She doesn't for a moment show any sense of responsibility to that whatsoever. She's just presenting, oh, but I know the truth, so you all have to come with me. And
should we play it?
Going anyway. father.
We'll play it and then I'll let you commentate.
And it's so messed up.
Get your tissues out, people.
Blackmail.
This is possibly the most heartbreaking part of the pageant. Sarah informs her father that she is answering the call to go to Nauvoo, whether he gives permission or not. The father pushes back and reminds her that she is essential to the family and she shouldn't abandon her family for this religion. She insists that he should go with her because she doesn't want to abandon her family, but she is going. He raises some very valid concerns about the frontier nature of Nauvoo, but she remains unswayed. But this is the thing. The church will force you to choose between your family and the church.
And the temple.
Peter. Yeah.
And
like with weddings.
Yeah, there's not a moment's hesitation there that maybe the right Christ-like thing to do would be to consider her obligation and duty to her younger siblings or her father who's a widower. The church trumps everything. And watching that is actually really painful because most of us are experiencing now, if you become in any way a dissident or labelled apostate or whatever, where people really close to you, including in your immediate family, in many situations will choose the church over you.
Mm-hmm.
It comes first, always.
Yeah, I've lost family to it.
To the point. Yeah, to the point where it's abusive and, it's complete shunning and rejection. And they justify this most powerful. This is in a way, some of the most powerful acting and writing, yet also the most revealing. I mean, it's brilliant, but in its horror, because this is telling the truth. This is what a cult looks like. This is what high demand fundamentalist religion will do to you and what it did to these people. There is something powerful and amazing about being willing to relocate to another country and make these sacrifices for an ideal. It was extraordinary, that so many people did that, and we can, be as cynical as we like about their motivations and the complexities there. But ultimately, what this boils down to is not just something heroic and unique and weird that these people did 200 years ago. It's going on today. And this is the sinister side of this religion. You will announce to your family that you are doing this, whether they like it or not, that you are willing to sacrifice everything for it, and they can either buck their ideas up and support you, or you will withdraw from them. You will go to another country. You will no longer be part of their lives. And it can work both ways, but it's just, it's so unethical, and they're presenting this as an ideal story. And the idea is eventually people will come round. If on the boat, he gets impressed by another family and he starts to sort of have warm, fuzzy feelings. And eventually Mr. Ashton's glad that he got emotionally blackmailed into leaving the country and everything he knew because the rock of his family was leaving. And emotionally blackmailed him into going with her. I mean, it's so... And the problem is, these things are written by insider Mormons who don't know the full history and who have got this narrative running in their head because they're living this life themselves. It's completely normal for them. They can't see the red flags. People acting this can't see the red flags. They can't see how messed up this is. All of this messaging, all of it is so problematical. And so they do, and then they leave the church.
Yeah, so that's the problem. I don't have an issue with that scene and that idea. I think if the church is true, then we should sacrifice everything for it. We should leave. Jesus kind of taught the idea of leaving your family, to follow him. That's fine. You should leave all those things. You should sacrifice everything if the church is true. The problem is this whole idea. It goes right back to that initial quote. If you really search, then you'll find out the truth. But we don't teach that. We don't really teach that. We don't say, right, okay, we believe in the church so much. We know that it's true so much. But what we want you to do is we want you to go away and be really informed. We want you to read the history, good and bad. We want to hear. We want you to hear what the detractors are saying. We really want you to study it out and search it. And then if you do that, then the truth will prevail. Because remember, that's what it's all about. The truth will prevail, and you'll join the church, and you'll be blessed for it, and everything will be fantastic.
But instead, fine. No.
If you're doing that, that's fine. But we're not. We're saying, don't look at any of that. Don't look at the negative stuff. Don't listen to the detractors. don't like and subscribe Nemo the Mormon. Whatever you do, watch out for this guy. Don't do any of those things. Just trust in your feelings. Don't really search. Really search. You don't need to really search. You already know that it's true, don't you? You do, don't you? And that's the problem. Everything else is fine. If it's true, then it's all good. But we never look at the obverse of that. We never say, if it's not true, then you would be making a massive mistake. So you better find out. And that's the problem.
Jane, then Maven. Thank you, Julian.
I would have loved to see that this scene is the pageant. This scene could be the whole pageant for me. Just keep workshopping that scene and doing it again and again and again, because this is the tension that the church has always existed in and will continue to exist in, relationships and the church. If they had, I was really excited by this idea that finally we were getting to see, look, he's feeling something. Look, he's now casting aside the don't do acting and make it for them. You're now, there's a truth that's trying to come out here. And unfortunately, they were sort of sticking with this, just not quite giving the actors the material to be able to take it past the finishing post. If this happened today, people are discouraged from converting to the church when they don't have family support. They know there's a tension there. It does not happen in the, I'm going to say to the same extent or in the same ways, because I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but certainly it is not the issue that is as prevalent as it was, where people would just, that's it, I'm out of here. Another issue is the very real thing about, this child is not the mother of children and cannot be expected to carry the weight of that kind of family responsibility. And as a young carer, should be empowered to make her own decisions and move away from that kind of relationship. And that's a wonderful thing. The other thing is that the church actually will be fine without you. You can wait. You don't have to sacrifice everything if it's true, because you'll be fine. And at a time when maybe circumstances look a little bit different, if you have, if your father feels differently, if you feel differently, Jesus isn't going anywhere. He can wait. There's also the possibility of a father who doesn't convert. What could that look like if he went across with them and because of whatever reason, and it wasn't about faith, if it was a lifestyle issue? Yeah, they seem like good people to go and try this experiment with. But I think for me, the thing that made it really exciting were the possibilities of, what if that situation, we see that playing out today with relationships that are marriages. What if one of those people is leaving? What if one of those people needs you to stay? And that's where the hook is, and that's where the emotion comes into it. All of our church experience, if we put historicity to the side, because history isn't really being done in this play, and they're trying to, it's about the trust that is built. And when trust is broken or not gained, that's where the truth lies. This is the beauty there.
Julian?
My comment.
But first,
that.
Oh, sorry. We need to settle something about Julian and whether he's drinking Vimto in front of people without sharing. That is a comment from Alan up here. He wants to know. You're not? Okay, good. Right. Julian, then Maven.
Right.
I just wanted to make a comment.
It was my turn after Jane.
Okay, yeah. Maven, then Julian.
Okay.
Not
I'm just holding you to your word, Nemo. That's all. That's all.
Thank you.
So, and my comment piggybacks off of James really well. At least I hope so. And that's about kind of the historicity of it and the narrative going on. And this is a comment Coco B made earlier about that she didn't think families were really the big sell for converts then. And I'm happy to be corrected, but I think that that's true. My understanding, and this would add to why someone would have the urgency and want to be going to the saints, is not so much families can be together forever, because that's a today selling point in the church, back then it's latter days, it's last days. So Jane said Jesus isn't going anywhere. That's not the issue. The issue is Jesus coming again, and it's going to happen any day now. And so you want to be with the saints, you want to be in Zion. That's where you want to be, with the
Great
Lord's
point.
people. So that's what was really going on back then, is my understanding. Again, I'm happy to be corrected if that's not the case, but it wasn't this big family cell. That's all. I guess I would be presentism, I think, kind of inserting the present focus on that back into
which is what I would like to see happen. But you're exactly right. There was a real tension that I have to get there. I have to do this, and that same thing where missionaries setting dates for baptism. This is something we want to work towards now. Is it really? Is there really the urgency? Do you really? So this is what I'm saying about this scene. There's so much that you can pull out of this scene and workshop.
There's also Mark Johnson saying the socio-economic element to it, where they preached in the working class towns of the UK, and that's reflected in newspapers of the time, where they're talking about how it's only the poor and those that seek for a better life that are being pulled in by the lure of Mormonism. Julian, please. Thank you, Maven.
I was going to piggyback off something Jane said as well about things like that not really happening so much today, and I think sadly it does. I've certainly known of a few instances, definitely in the last decade. I know it must happen all the time, of missionaries teaching somebody in a family where they're not married, and actually telling them to get their partner to move out of the home where their children reside, so that they can get baptized. And that's just appalling. It's just absolutely appalling to actually say, no, I think we should break up this family now so that we can baptize one of the members.
Yeah, but the church has always demanded conformity, and I think that's a place we could almost wrap this up, is going back to that picture of me that was placed and handed out. There you go, that lovely picture. Is that it's my lack of conformity. I'm a member in good standing. On paper, no one's enacted any official church discipline against me. There's no reason why I can't participate in the church just like anyone else. And yet, because my views don't conform, I am clearly not welcome at the pageant. And there is a little picture out there letting people know as such. So I think this pageant was a narrative that was designed to be very strictly controlled by the committee that it was developed by. It was always going to be a narrative that's ultimate goal was to promote faith in the church at the cost of essentially anything else. But thank you everyone for joining us to talk about it. And I hope that feedback is received by the pageant team, seeing as they asked for it. This is our feedback. And we're really grateful and honour the sacrifices of those that took time out of their lives to participate in the pageant and what that they went through in order to do that. I'm fully understanding of that. And this is in no way any sort of diatribe towards them. This is simply to say that I don't think the pageant hit the marks it needed to. So, thanks everyone. Thanks. Julian's waving. Should I put everyone on screen so they can wave goodbye? Or has Julian got a point? Julian, you waving goodbye, or do you want to make a point?
I'll be brief.
As long as you say like, comment, subscribe at the end of it.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Promise.
I'll
say it at the end.
Well.
Cool.
No,
right, here we go.
Say, my kind of last take on it is that the most accurate thing about the pageant was the title, Truth Will Prevail. Truth is prevailing. That's why, we've had so many different broadcasts on this channel where we've talked about how the church in the UK is shrinking, because more and more people are understanding the truth about what's happened, and are real, that kind of idea of them really searching and finding out that a lot of the things that they were told were true are actually nonsense. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Truth will prevail. Like and subscribe.